the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. Ian, always a great day to be a Beaver, but a couple nights ago was especially heartbreaking for Bemidji State University. They got to the semifinals in the NSIC men's basketball tournament. It looked like, they've been getting outplayed all game, but it looked like in the second part of the second half, they hung around just enough. They were getting the shots they needed to get. They were up by 1 point with just with
They were up. They were up by 1 point as the clock hit zero.
As the clock hit zero with under a second to go. And the unfortunate thing was when there was 1 second to go, the ball was flying through the air, and MSU Moorhead made a fadeaway long two with a hand in his face. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but just drills it, like, to the point of watching it in real time. As soon, like, you can just tell with some of those shots, there's no like, that's not going in, or that you always know when it's going in. And that it just, as soon as it left his hands, I was like, and he made it, and MSUM won, and they advanced, and Bemidji State season, for the most part, likely is done. So Ian, now that I just recapped the end of the game, what was your gut level feeling after that game, and how are you feeling now a couple days removed?
Well, the gut feeling was just like heartbreak. I literally just I was watching on my phone. I had a couple coworkers that were interested because I was getting pretty into it. So we were all kind of huddled around my phone watching it. And as soon as I saw the shot one, I kind of just swiped up. I'm like, there's no way that we just lost like that. Like me and you were kind of going back and forth during the game, how it's like, this is going to be really hard for them to do if they can't rebound a little better. It's so hard to mount a comeback when you allow all these offensive rebounds. But you know what? Like, they did it. They got back into the game. They were down, I think, at 14 at one point in the second half. And they got back into the game, had a lead. And, we can look at Kone's free throw attempts at the end of the game all we want to, but I don't know how much, what if he just makes one of those? I don't know that changes it too much. Obviously, they did get a 2-point attempt, and you would have been forcing them into a 3-point attempt. But even with the current circumstance, I thought you did about as good of a job as you could on that final possession of making them scramble and literally having to hit a Hail Mary type shot. And to the credit of, I believe it was McGee who hit the shot. Just heartbreaking, man. It was such a good effort. I think the worst thing that could have happened to them is overtime, because I think it was already Tennyson who had fouled out.
Yep.
They really had only gone 6 deep.
Tennyson made a lot of threes too to get him back in that game.
Yeah, he did. He had a much better second half after that huge Wayne State game, which we'll touch on that in a second to give us just a positive note on what went right in that game. But Andrew Williams, I think his name's Andrew, right? He got hurt, the freshman guard early in the game against Wayne State, and that it really shortened up the bench for an already kind of shallow Bemidji State team. I think we talked about that maybe after that Augustana game or before it. But yeah, it was tough to lose 1 point to Moorhead in the semifinals, and then to see Moorhead go on and clobber Duluth. Now, granted, we haven't matched up as well against Duluth this season. We've lost both games by 15 and then by 20, 25 or whatever.
That one from a week ago we don't talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't really match up as well against Duluth as we did against Moorhead. But you never know what can happen in that game. And like we kind of talked about, we just saw the Central Region rankings, and this game, that one shot could come down to literally ending BSU season, because I didn't know how much of a chance there was BSU could get in with an at-large bid if they didn't win this tournament outright. But you'd have to think that a win against a receiving votes Moorhead team and a championship game appearance, even with a loss, right now they're sitting at 9th. And, keep an eye on Sunday. Like we said, we're kind of going to go along with things as if the season has ended, because that's what all the data suggests right now.
That's what the projections say.
But keep your ear to the ground, because there might be a small chance that there's more basketball to come. We're hoping and praying. But man, that might be the difference. You get that win, You're now
You've beaten Moorhead twice.
you've beaten Moorhead twice. You're now 21, and let's say you lose the championship game 21-11 to end the season. That's a pretty good resume. So it's tough, especially like that. Like they played their tails off in the second half. I noticed in the second half, and to be fair, I haven't watched a ton of their games like fully throughout this year. I've tried to catch as much of the second halves of games as I can. But I've been focusing primarily on hockey this year, and maybe my mental health is worse because of it. But I did notice that they switched in the second half. They played a little bit of a 2-3 zone, and the first time I saw it, I was like, "Wait a minute, are we doing that all half?" And I was like, "That's a little risky because playing that zone defense can kind of invite good shooters to find an open zone. If you obviously if you play the zone right, it can help you kind of cut down those lanes and help you find shooters a little bit easier. But you have to be playing pretty well in that zone. But I think they just used it, a couple times in the second half just to kind of break up the flow and switch up on that MSUM offense, and it did seem to work to their credit. I just thought that was a little bit of a risky move, especially with how hot Moorhead was shooting in the first half. But we talked about it. I mean, we were pretty lucky to only be down 10. It seemed like a lot worse off of a first half for BSU based off of how well MSU was shooting, how poorly BSU was rebounding. And
I think Bemidji State made like 1 or 2 threes in the entire first half. It was so from a shooting perspective, they weren't making anything. Moorhead was making their shots. So it was like to only be down by 10. It's like if Bemidji State could hit their shots, this will be a ball game. And that's what they ended up doing. But yeah, rebounding is something we've talked about all season long. And for a lot of the game, it killed them. They made just enough plays to hang in there, though.
And that's what I said. I said, you just got to hang around. If you're there at the end of the game, you can make your run. You don't have to be up the whole game to win the game. You can be within 5-6 points. And, a lot of the game, it wasn't that close, but they were in a position where they could make a run and come back in the second half. And yes, to your credit, 2 of 11 in the first half from 3, and then 5 of 8 in the second half to come back into it. Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough game. I thought for sure that they had it in the bag. I don't know why. I just had so much blind optimism about this team. Maybe it's just my polar opposite of the hockey team, where it's just pessimistic all the time. I think I changed my Twitter name to that, like the pessimistic voice of Beaver hockey. But more to come on that in the next hour. But
right now, you're just the heartbroken voice of Beaver men's basketball.
Yeah, man, that really, especially because I think it's like only their third time that they've had a 20-win season in school history, tied for the second best win total of all time.
And by the way, the other 2 times they've went to the NCAA tournament, or at least one of them.
Yeah,
10 years ago.
10 years ago. But man, that's just a tough way for a season like that to end. Really, really tough season, or not a tough season, but like a tough end to a great season. I mean, we started off, and I think we went on a 5-game, was it 4 games? 4-game losing streak early in the season in like December. St. Cloud State, Duluth, Moorhead, and Northern State. And we're like, okay, yep, it's back. We started off pretty well, but it was games against Nebraska, Kearney, and Southern Arkansas.
It's another winter
in
Bemidji. The men's basketball team is just kind of 500. They're underwhelming, and then all of a sudden they just clicked.
Yeah, and so it's been like a complete joy covering these guys all season, and having like we said, like competitive basketball in late January and February, like basketball that matters. And then you're coming up on March and you're still playing in the tournament. By the way, the 4 teams in the semifinals were the 4 teams from the top of the NSIC North. So I think that just gives even more credit to BSU because they played in that division this year. It's the polar opposite almost of football, where we were not in the division that was kind of fighting, the whole time. We were we were in the more top heavy division, but so it's kind of give and take. Yeah, but we definitely played up to our competition this year. We got a win against Moorhead. We proved that we could beat St. Cloud State later on in the season. And then I do think getting that win against Wayne State in the quarterfinals, hopefully that's a big stepping stone for this program, because it would be nice to not just kind of see this season as a one-off.
Yeah,
Let's hope that this season can be something where even if we're not competing for, you know, even if it's not coming down to the semifinals and we're one shot away from going to the championship game every year, get to the quarterfinals. Be a consistent team that's threatening in the top four of the North, and
just be playing
make
competitive
it.
basketball in February. That's it. If you can do that for the next couple of years, that'd be a legitimate success for this core that they have now. And they do have kind of a core. I know they're losing Kone. I know he's an NSIC all second team, so that's tough to lose. But they still have Sutherland coming back for a senior year, so you still have that presence down low. Tennyson is very young. What's his name?
Tennyson is a freshman, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
he's
So
a freshman.
Tennis is
And
a
what?
freshman. Braden Williams is a freshman.
Yep, Braden Williams. That's his name. And then yeah, they
Dalton
have.
Albright will be back.
Mm-hmm. So they have
So
pieces. Kone's the only one they're losing. So if you can now Kone's
RJ Smith as well.
yes, right. So Kone and Smith, those two guys are down. Smith got some minutes in the rotation, but Kone was kind of that main ball. He's your point guard. He's your ball handler. So you're gonna have to figure out who replaces him, if that comes via a transfer or if that comes whoever's just kind of down the pipe. But Bemidji State has pieces to compete. So it's gonna I mean, like you said, are they going to be on the doorstep of an NSIC championship game berth? We'll see, but there's no reason to think that they shouldn't be playing competitive basketball games in late February next season because of the team that they have right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, especially nowadays with the transfer portal, like you said. That's how we got guys like John Sutherland, and I believe Kone was a transfer. This is second year in Bemidji, or third year in Bemidji, I believe.
I believe third
But
year.
he did transfer in as well. So there's so much that could happen. It's going to be an interesting offseason because, like you said, they have a solid backcourt of young guys, with Tennyson and with Braden Williams already there. And then Jace Lohman, who did get some minutes in this tournament as well. He's only a sophomore, so he'll still be back around. So they still have some guys that they can kind of lean on back there. And then you figure it might be a little bit of a two-headed monster down in the post with Albright and with John Sutherland next year. Sutherland, if he could take even another step higher than he did this year, I mean, that's going to be a ridiculous senior season for him. The now senior from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. So, I mean, I think we may see a little regression. It depends on what happens. There's a lot that goes into it, but I don't think it's going to be quite the regression we've seen. I don't think that they're going to be necessarily falling out of NSIC tournament berths. And I think that that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have a good basketball culture around Bemidji.
Yeah, I mean, and we mentioned this on the last podcast. I think we've both been pretty big advocates in the past of Minnesota's got a good basketball culture if you can get a good team behind them. I mean, it's not going to take much for Minnesotans to get behind it, even though it's a hockey state, even though Bemidji is a hockey community. And that's not a knock on hockey. It's just saying that there's also people who enjoy basketball and can get behind both hockey and basketball. And if basketball can be good, you'll find people who support it. I mean, look at the playoff game was a very fun atmosphere at the BSU gymnasium. You're not maybe going to get that every weekend because everybody's competing with hockey and just with generally what's ever going on in their own stuff. But I think that there can be some optimism. There can be some momentum from last season in terms of just a fan perspective. Like, oh, these guys were good last year. Like, oh yeah, all right, let's go check them out again. Like, let's see what's going on with this men's basketball team. And that's a positive step in the right direction. Don't really know who Bemidji State is coming up the pipe in terms of a recruiting class, but at the same time, there's pieces in place for at least the next couple of years to be competitive. And that's encouraging because the one knock on Boshi's always kind of been that he can't quite keep a core together. Like every time it feels like there's a core, somebody transfers out or somebody just quits the team or somebody, whatever. And it looks like they have a group of guys. They were able to win. He kept them together, like all this stuff. So if they can keep this train on the tracks, there should be some competitive basketball.
Yeah, and that's all we can really ask for. I think that we've got a good first year. We got a first year AD, and I think things have gone pretty dang well for Britt this year. Two teams this fall go into the NCAA tournament. And honestly, I mean, like we said, I don't really know how the selection process works for this, but Bemidji State, at least for right now, is still technically in the running. So I guess that's not out the window yet. And like we'll talk about in a little bit, Hockey's about to go on another magical run in March to make it back to the NCAA tournament themselves. So we're gonna have four, and then spring sports. It's gonna be a nuts. It's gonna be a nuts end to the year. So
With that, maybe this is a good time to talk about that Wayne State game. So the Beavers did get the upset against the Wildcats, and we talked and we said there's no reason that this team shouldn't compete with Wayne State and even get the win. And that's exactly what they did. Now, Tennyson had a great game shooting, just made threes left and right. And I think it was just one of those things where Bemidji State really felt locked in, and they felt, and we talked about this before, as the season was ending, BSU felt like a team that was gaining confidence as they were finishing the year, and that confidence carried over into the tournament and got them a nice win against Wayne State.
Yeah, that was a really good win. I mean, having one of your main minute getters in the backcourt, Braden Williams, go down pretty early in the game. And you have to have guys step up. And that's exactly what Johnny Tennyson did. John Sutherland had a solid game. Kone had a kind of quiet, solid game. He went 4 for 9 from deep, shot 6 of 14 overall. But he had a quiet 16 points and 8 assists, and it was kind of because of the play of Sutherland and Tennyson were taking the front and center. But overall, he did pretty well too to keep them in that game. And I said, they're going to make some runs. Wayne State's not going to just roll over and die. They're going to make some runs. It's just how well can Bemidji kind of stave off those advances from Wayne State, and they did a pretty dang good job of it throughout the entirety of the game. And then having a little run early in the second half to kind of pull away from Wayne State, and they were able to hold that lead for the rest of the game. So that was a fun game to watch. It really was. Overall, just it was never like out of reach. You never thought that like Wayne State was completely out of it, but you were never really super concerned. I mean, you were if you're a Beaver fan, but you were never like I didn't have.
It seemed like they were in the driver's seat all game.
Exactly. They had control of the game. There was never one instance where you thought like, oh my gosh, Wayne State just like got 8 straight points in a minute and 20 seconds, and we just had to burn another timeout. Like this could be where the wheels come off. Pretty much every time Wayne State would get 2 buckets in a row, we'd go down, get another bucket, get another stop, and then answer back again. So it's just it was a good game. And it was super fun. I enjoyed watching. That's like the first time I think I've ever actually watched anything from the Pentagon. Like in terms of postseason play. But that's a cool environment there. Very cool. I'm happy that we were able to get some experience in there, because like for these guys, like the freshman guards that we have, getting to go there and be part of that tournament atmosphere and getting to play multiple games there was so big. And I wonder some too, because we did have an extra like entire day's rest on top of Moorhead. I wonder how much that might have played into the game, and having a full day's rest might have maybe helped us, especially in the second half, when Moorhead's trying to stave us off, and we've got a little bit fresher legs maybe. But then again, I think it's kind of counterbalanced by the fact that we only played like 6 players the entire game. And I haven't looked at the minutes for Jace Loman at all, but I'm not sure that he just played 10 minutes. So Sutherland and Kone didn't leave the court. Albrecht played 38, 37 for Smith, and then 35 for Johnny Tennyson. And that's, I think, mostly because he fouled out with like 2 minutes to go. So, I mean, it was probably pretty tough on those guys to play that many minutes, but man, what an exciting season. We can always hope that it's not over, but even if it is, I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed about. Getting a semifinal tournament appearance, winning 2 playoff games, getting to host a playoff game, winning against Augustana, like you said, in such a great environment there at the BSU gymnasium. I mean, you can't really ask for more. I would have never thought this year coming in, and maybe that's just some of my, ignorance towards BSU basketball and what they could have done this year. But I would have never thought that a 20-win season and a potential NCAA tournament berth would have been anywhere near what we were getting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year, hey, Bemidji State men's basketball is going to be an unbelievable contested made shot away from going to the NSIC championship game. Like, get out of here. But that's where they were. And they had to capture everybody's eyes a little bit, but they did. And they proved us right. They proved themselves right, I should say, to get invested in them, because they went about as far as they could have gone. I mean, again, as we talked about, that made shot, there's literally nothing you can do on that one. So it's like they played.
That was like the most frustrating part about it, is that it's not like we just made a silly, like, oh my gosh, you didn't watch the backdoor cut and it just gave him a free bucket. It was like you played really good defense.
It's not even like a miraculous like half court shot. It was like the guy was playing good defense, like you said, a hand up, did everything you could do without fouling the guy.
It almost sucks that like they didn't get a good look right away, because either they get the good look right away and they make it, and then you still have like 5 seconds or 6 seconds or however many seconds left
Bemidji State still
to get your own chance, or like they miss it and then you get another chance to get a free throw. But man, it just everything about the end of that game was just like, not everything about it, but like the final 20 seconds of the game, I should say, just that was tough. That was a really tough watch, especially with how many last minute goals hockey has given up this year. It didn't feel like men's basketball was going to get cursed like that too.
It proves with hockey and with men's basketball, you can play as good as you want, or you can put yourself in as good a position as you want for the entire game. But if you don't finish in those last minute, it comes like you can undo everything that you've worked the entire game to get. And like there's that adage that more games are lost than won. And that's not quite true in this situation because of the miraculous made shot. But, we talked about the offensive rebounding and just rebounding in general for Bemidji State, that in that game was just tough. MSUM was doing a good job on the boards. And then just some of those missed free throws down late. Now, again, overtime wouldn't have been ideal for the Beavers either way. But still, it's just one of those woulda, coulda, shouldas. But like you said earlier in this podcast, at the end of the day, Bemidji State still put themselves in as good a position to win as they could have given the circumstances. And that's what's the most frustrating, is we talk about momentum and that Wayne State game. Bemidji State controlled the game the entire time. Moorhead was in control the entire game. And with less than 5 minutes to go, Bemidji State just grabbed it from them and almost just took it. And then at the very last second, Moorhead grabbed control of the wheel and spun themselves out. But, I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I just kind of want to just sigh, because it's, what do you do? But that's how Bemidji State men's basketball has been this season. I mean, hats off to them if that's how this season ends, like we've talked about, just giving themselves an opportunity to do some really fun things. And I'm excited to see what the future holds for them, granted that they can keep all of this intact. There's nothing else to say other than, I mean, they got to replace Kone for next year and RJ Smith. But they still should be fun to watch next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was a tough way for the season to end, but you got to keep your head held high if you're them, because that was far better than I'm sure 95% of the people in Bemidji thought coming into the year. And it's definitely something to be excited about going into next year. And that's something we haven't had about Beaver basketball in a long time. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, I mean, like we said, kind of keep your ear to the ground. I believe the selection show is on Sunday. There's, I would say, an outside chance that the Beavers get a random selection in that. Like we said, I've never been a part of a Division II basketball selection show process, so not exactly 100% sure how that goes down. But keep your ear to the ground, because the season might not be over. But for now, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so. And so now let's take a look at some of the spring sports, Ian, and just kind of see what's going on with Bemidji State here. As we're gonna, again, if you're listening to this podcast right now, we are gonna do another podcast talking about hockey, and Lucas of Beaver Territory is going to join us. So be on the lookout for that podcast. Where we'll talk about the CCHA tournament, recap the WCHA women's tournament. So we're going to talk about hockey in a different podcast. So hang on for that. We're excited to talk with Lucas. But for now, we're going to talk about some of the other sports as we cruise along with our season. So Ian, putting you on the spot here, what else is going on in Beaver Territory?
Well, I was kind of looking before, and if I remember correctly, softball and tennis both had a break over this week, and they start back up on the 5th. But the baseball team was in action in Springfield, Illinois, against
First games of the season.
Illinois Springfield, number 12 in the country. It looks like, and things probably did not go to as planned as they would have liked.
They certainly played the number 12 team in the country.
Yeah, there was baseball played last week. That's for sure. 12-0 loss to start the season, and then a tighter 3-4 contest, but still coming out of the wrong end. 2-14 in game 3 and 5-16 in game 4. I'm not going to add those up. I'm pretty sure a lot of people listening will understand that is not very much.
Getting outscored 46-10.
Yeah, not very many runs to very many runs. So
that 3-4 game wasn't quite awful. They almost pulled off the upset, but yeah, I mean, you play the number 12 team in the country. You play the number 12 team in the country. You get your lunch handed to you a little bit going on the road in that situation. But hey, get some baseball games underneath your belt. Now they go on the road starting on Friday. They have another 4-game series in Liberty, Missouri. They're going to take on William Jewell, another team that Bemidji State typically. It's funny in college baseball, you end up kind of playing a lot of the same teams early in the season. They're not always down in Florida, although they do have some games going down to Tucson, Arizona next week as well. But they always go like to that Missouri, Southern Illinois kind of area where it's just you're like, if it's a turfed field and the team takes care of it, they're just able to play it. And that's what Bemidji State was able to do.
Yeah, I'm not too 100% sure. I mean, obviously they're the number 12 team in the country. They're pretty good based off of that metric alone. But I'm not 100% sure how much you want to take from this 4 games. Obviously, it'd be nice if that game 2 could have turned into, like you said, an upset win, and then you're looking at 1-3, and with the expectations that we kind of know based off of how BSU baseball has done in the past. I wouldn't necessarily be too shocked by that, but hopefully they can come out here against William Jewell and get some more runs on the board, because that seems to be, well, I mean, I don't know. The runs might not have even been the issue. I know that Division II baseball is like, you shouldn't necessarily judge it on the same scoring metric as like Major League Baseball. I'm sure there's more runs scored on the college level than there is in the pros, but definitely double-digit runs are probably not something you want to be giving up every game.
No, not ideal. I mean, they're never going to be that Bemidji State, Minnesota State Mankato marathon that took place like 5 years ago. 6 years. How long?
That was the year before I stepped foot. I think that was 2014 or 2015.
Like the spring of 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. That was because I remember seeing it on SportsCenter or Instagram and be like, that's my university right there. Like scoring 20 runs and still losing a baseball game by 20 runs.
Let's go. Anyway, Bemidji State trying to do their part. Tyrese Allen drove in one of the runs in their final game. Zach Moritz ended up getting an RBI as well, walk with the bases loaded. Jack Munson added the last hit for Bemidji State in the 4th inning. And mind you, I'm looking at the box score here of that last game against Illinois Springfield, because they're 2 doubleheaders. So I'm trying to see if they played 2 straight 9-inning games, and it looks like they did. So for Bemidji State, again, there's some tough ball games to play. You're not gonna have too much success against them, but again, it's just kind of getting back into that baseball swing. And these non-conference games, I mean, whatever, just kind of hold tight, and then you'll get to some conference games. March 18th is the first matchup against Concordia St. Paul. It says it's at St. Paul, so we'll see if that game actually ends up getting played, because typically March 19th, it's not quite ready for baseball in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I see 2 of those games. You might not 100% know for sure that this is what it means. I know what DH means in terms of baseball, but is this meaning that those games they play with a designated hitter, and then the
that's
other
a
game they would not?
Doubleheader.
See, man, the DH and I know baseball, like I just assume designated hitter. I don't know why.
They're playing 2 games in a day, so the first game would be at 1:30, the second game at 4:30.
If I would have looked at the schedule and been like, yeah, there's 2 games there on March 18th, maybe I would have put 2 and 2 together. But just trying to make a quick assumption. I guess that's what I get for that, making myself look like a little bit of a fool, but it is what it is.
Uh, Interestingly enough, Bemidji State has no games. I'm just peeking at their schedule here. For Bemidji State baseball, there are no games at US Bank Stadium, which is something that they did in seasons past. So it's interesting. I mean, it's all about scheduling. Like you literally just rent US Bank Stadium out. If we wanted to, Ian, we could rent US Bank Stadium out for like a Beaver Banter softball game. Like, and if we paid US Bank Stadium the money, we could rent it out for 3 hours. So that's essentially all colleges do when they, except for the Gophers, who I think they must have some kind of deal in place with US Bank Stadium for Gopher baseball. But US Bank Stadium is something that the Beavers have done in recent years, and I think it's kind of fun because you get to go down to the Twin Cities. You typically get to play some conference games there and get to have some games in the books before then, but just might have been booked out, just might have wanted to find another team who wanted to spend the money on it. We'll see. It's the interesting part of baseball when you get to your conference part of the schedule and everybody looks around because it's a lot of Minnesota teams and Northern Dakotas, and they're like, we still have snow. It's mid-April. I don't know what to tell you. One year, Bemidji State only got to play, like, I kid you not, 6 games on their home field all season long. That's just, and you talk about why Bemidji State struggles to get a good baseball program off the ground. And part of it's just the coaching staff is behind the 8 ball right away because it's hard to get people to want to go play baseball in northern Minnesota like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be like one of the biggest hurdles you have to jump, because it's not like a basketball program where it's like, yeah, it's really cold, but we play inside, so it doesn't really affect us at all. Travel might be affected, like this last tournament. There was some games that were moved up, games that were moved back, because of snow, but like it wasn't necessarily, hey, we got to go play like 200 miles south of here, in a dome, somewhere because there's still a foot of snow on the ground, and it
Or we have
probably
to
won't
just
go
play a
away
bunch of
until
games down in Mankato or something. Like you're just
yeah,
constantly on the road.
yeah. So that's got to be one of the biggest hurdles for them, just in general, to be able to field a competitive baseball team. So I think we both kind of have accepted that in the past, of our time talking about BSU baseball and even softball. But yeah, it should be interesting. Hopefully, some of this good luck for some of these programs kind of rubs off on one of these spring programs, and they can have a little bit better season than maybe we're used to seeing. I know we've seen some good seasons out of softball in the past where they're at least a competitive team. Baseball's not necessarily had the same luck, I can't say, with any confidence. So we'll see. Obviously, right now it's just kind of that preseason. You're getting not preseason, they count, but it's almost like a spring training. You're playing against
Yeah.
non-conference opponents, just getting a feel for your team, and then hopefully come March 18th, we've got some stuff figured out.
Yeah. The thing about Bemidji State softball is that at the very least, because now that the Chet is turfed, if the field's not ready, they'll just go play on the football field, which is what a lot of some of the NSIC teams will do. But it's just always, and don't take this as a knock, whoever's listening, but this is always very fascinating to me that it's Division II softball, and they're like, all right, we're gonna throw some bases down on a turf football field, and you're just gonna play. Your backstop is a snowbank. Props to them for props to them. It's fun. Like I would love to play in that kind of environment, but it's always funny that like this Division II softball, like these are very good and talented softball players, and they're just kind of playing with orange bases that they found in the back of a shed and just kind of throw them onto the field and try and play. I mean, they're gamers; they'll play in it, but it's always just kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like how big is Division II really? Because like you've got teams that are, I don't want to say like, Bemidji State's a smaller school, but they're not a big school in terms of student body size, even compared to some other Division II universities. But I mean, like you said, it's just kind of weird. It feels like an elementary school game almost. It's like, hey, these rocks are going to be the bases. If you hit it past this line, it's a home run.
This kid,
Play ball.
when his team is hitting, his glove is second base, and when your team is hitting, your glove is second base.
Yeah, exactly. It does. It feels a little silly, but if it's what they got to do in northern Minnesota to get some games in,
Better than having to get
it's
on a
what you got to
bus and
do.
go 6 hours just to play a game. So
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, another advantage of the Chet being turfed. So somehow it
W.
always swings back to Beaver football and women's soccer. So
Yes.
we'll always just try and relay it back to that.
Yeah, it's been too many months since we've talked about them in the entirety, so we had to bring it back to the chat, uh, and have some of that magic from last fall rub off on the softball team this year.
So look out for this has been the Beaver Banter podcast. Look out for our next podcast that'll have Lucas of Beaver Territory. He'll join us and we'll talk about men's and women's hockey, and we'll get ready for the CCHA tournament coming up. We'll see if the Beavers can pull off the upset in that one. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out sometime shortly. I'm CJ Baumgartner, my co-host Ian Rivers. This has been Beaver Banter. We'll catch you next time.